Hello everyone, you're watching Let's Talk About Prepping. I'm Tyler, your host, and in this video I want to talk to a few groups that sometimes feel underrepresented in the prepping community. The elderly, the young, those on the medical system, and those on an extremely low budget. Now I know that other channels do talk about these things, and some channels especially talk about extremely low budget prepping, and I don't want to detract from those channels' efforts, but it's definitely true that people who fit these descriptions often feel neglected in the prepping conversation. I've often seen comments along the lines of, I'm quite elderly and don't feel that I have the energy to prepare or anything to offer in a collapse, or I'm a teenager and my family doesn't care about prepping and I don't think there's anything I can do. Or perhaps even worse, I am reliant on medication or doctors for my health and I feel like I'd be screwed in an emergency situation. Now, for all of these people, there are some harsh realities, and especially if you're elderly or used to health complications, you're probably not a stranger to harsh realities. But there are some things that we can talk about for each of these groups that are actionable advice that they can do to help themselves prepare. Now, when it comes to extremely low budget prepping, it's not necessarily enough to simply talk about cheap preps or stacking on a budget, because there are a lot of people who have already tightened their budget and who, despite the fact that they are on welfare and that they do live extremely cheaply and eat only rice and other essential staples and not overprocessed and expensive food, and they are unable to put food aside, and especially not able to stack years worth of food or supplies or purchase gear that doesn't help them in the here and now, because they have dental bills to pay or a car that they need to keep running so that they don't have their own private economic collapse. These people don't necessarily need more cheap purchasing and stacking options, but something more like what the homeless community uses to get by on the fringe of consumerism and on the fringe of medical care. And hold on, we got some eagles flying around here. And these people would be able to benefit far more from improvised systems which substitute for those which preppers talk about buying, for improvised means of production, for improvised means of doing all the things that preppers talk about investing in for preparation. We do need to address people who will be stuck in an urban setting where they're not able to use bushcraft, who require urban craft to get by. The ability to jury rig items in such a way that does not cost initial investment, in which they're able to salvage free materials to do the things which we talk about purchasing things to perform. This is perhaps the most fortunate group of disenfranchised preppers, if you will, because it could be argued that what one stocks is the least important part of one's preps. We all realize that our house could burn down, or the government or marauders could chase us away from our preps. And those who rely solely on things that they've stocked will be far up a creek without a paddle compared to somebody who never had anything to stock but has all the abilities and all the skills and all the means of production and all the community in the world. So providing these for yourself, these things which don't necessarily cost any financial or substantial investment of any kind initially, puts you in a much better position than somebody who goes to their job every day, who makes a lot of money, who simply watches YouTube channels and buys the things that they suggest and puts them in their fancy, newly built ballistic shed, because you are able to continuously provide those things for yourself. You're able to replace your systems, your means of productions, your physical gear Because you made it yourself. Because you know how to produce it from things that you can find at a thrift store or in a junk heap. You're able to live off of the dregs of those who require large inputs for their systems. There will be people who are able to live off of the garbage of preppers after the collapse. These are the people who are already used to living below their means, who are used to living without inputs. And if you are somebody who lives on the edge of that, who is close enough that they see the end of their supplies already, then now's the time to start knowing how to scrounge, how to produce things from nothing. And for those reasons, you're perhaps the best off. There are plenty of people, like the elderly, who feel that they don't have the energy or the physical capability or the time to perform all of these things that the healthy poor person has. The elderly often feel that they will have nothing to offer in a collapse type situation, that no prepper group would ever want them, especially in a world where they aren't the elders of a tribe, where they don't have all of the practical knowledge of how to do things off the grid, all the things which in an ancient society gave the elderly extreme value. And that is one of the truly valuable things that any person can offer if they have the time and the faculty to know information like that. If you are elderly or are infirm for some other reason, focus on crafts, on the ability to produce things. It is pretty easy to sew up tactical mag pouches, even if they aren't as good as what voodoo makes. They are something that you will be able to barter, either now or in a future situation. Being able to produce food indoors is something that nearly anybody can do, and is a skill which is often neglected even in prepper groups. Sprouts are extremely nutritious, and it wouldn't be too bad to be the sprout lady. Now, when it comes to the elderly and the young, you're actually each other's solution. It used to be that young people, if they weren't going to be apprenticed to their father or some pre-decided person, they weren't going to learn the things that they needed to know to become who they were going to become from their parents, who often would have a very specific skill set. Young people used to have to find a mentor that suited them in their future from somebody else in their area. Now, this benefits both the elderly and the young, because the young person gets somebody with wisdom, with experience, someone who's able to guide them and foster their learning in the field of their choice. And the elderly people get someone with vigor, someone who's able to help them physically, someone who's able to relight that spark of life, and someone who's able to give your life in the end of your years meaning by having some form of immortality, by mentoring someone who will be here long after you are, by knowing as you go that you have markedly affected a young person and thereby the world. And in a very tangible sense, you have someone who is concerned about the same things, who is able to go and be your hands in situations where you might not. You guys know that 4-H is still a thing out there. Hopefully you're involved if it's something that benefits you or others. And it's a great way to create community. 4-H and different fair groups and things like that. There are people in your area who care about animal husbandry and various other things, and who are not far from being preppers themselves. You don't need to make somebody a prepper to have a younger friend or an older friend who cares about being able to talk about different things that might relate to prepping. Remember that you don't need to build a prepper group or a mutual assisting group in order to help yourself in tough situations. Communities help each other now and when things go wrong. And it's something that we often talk about having been lost. And it's something that we really need to gain, especially if we're somebody who's not as able to provide for ourselves as we want. Now, the elderly and the young can't necessarily help each other with the financial situation, but again, money isn't the key to prepping. And being able to discuss your needs, being able to help each other cover your needs is far more important than stocking for your needs. And for these reasons, the poor, the elderly, and the young are perhaps best off out of these so-called neglected prepper demographics. Those who are reliant on the medical system have a lot to fear should things go belly up in the economic system or the electric system or just the general supply grid. A lot of people require medicines to maintain their quality of life or even to stay alive. And for a lot of people, the withdrawals from these would be extremely ugly or even deadly. And this is something that isn't often addressed on prepping videos, aside from if you have medical needs, if you require prescription medication, see what you can do to try to stock up on those, or what you can do to get by without them. And I don't know if other prepping channels are unaware of the realities of prescription medication, or they know something I don't, but especially in the age of the opiate crisis, where people who need medication are kept from their medication, on the off chance that someone else might hurt themselves with that medication, it is very difficult to get even the amount of medicine that you need for your health, even if it's not an opiate, let alone convincing a doctor that you need extra just to stack away in case society collapses, or even just in case a hurricane blows through, if that's something that often happens. A lot of doctors will not discuss with you the fact that they will be at home helping their families or those who are able to barter with them, and not there at their clinic writing you prescriptions which will not even be filled because the pharmacy isn't receiving shipments. And so you're not going to have the conversation, and even if you did, you would not get the prescription for a year's worth of medicines. And if you began to unilaterally skip a dose here and there in order to store some extras of your drug ahead, and even if your drug was one where you could do that and not one which would harm you because they need to be taken in sequence or at very specific times, or because your heart rhythm relies on it, or various other things, if you ever admitted to your doctor that you are stashing your drug ahead of your needs, they may well be required to report you for that. I don't think that doctor-patient confidentiality extends into the concerns of the DEA. And so the concept that somebody can simply stash extra drugs is not one that works for most anybody whose physician isn't a direct family member or friend who's willing to risk their career to let you have extra pills. So this forces a lot of people to the conclusion that they would be up a creek without a paddle in such a situation. And for some people, this may be the case. And this is where the harsh realities that you may already be used to come into play. Because some medications are non-substitutable. Some medications perform metabolic functions or hormonal or psychological functions for you which cannot be replaced, and certainly can't be replaced in a short period of time. The things which you need to understand about your condition are the condition itself, its symptoms, the physiological causes, what your medicine does for you, what the dangers of withdrawing from your medicine are, and what some of the alternatives are for relieving some of your symptoms and perhaps trying to address the root cause of your illness. Now, if alternative medicine was better than curative medicine, it would be the curative medicine. And I don't want to detract from marijuana or kratom or any other alternative medicines that do provide tangible and real benefits for people. But a lot of medicine, a lot of alternative medicine is preventative medicine and doesn't increase quality of life greatly once the damage has been done. For that reason, it's not necessarily a good solution to simply talk about tinctures and poultices and other alternative options that aren't really going to drastically change things for someone who is currently coming off of a pharmaceutical that has done a lot for their body. You can't just replace that right away. These are things which you need to be doing already to alleviate your symptoms now and to alleviate the challenges that you might face if you ever are without modern medical care. And this isn't even addressing those who need dialysis or various other institutional cares that may not be replaceable. And that's where the real harsh realities come in, and perhaps why some preppers don't address these things, because they don't want to tell their viewers that the day may come where there may be nothing that can help them, and that it's necessary to think about the quality of your end-of-life care in a situation where commercial end-of-life care isn't a thing. And that's very difficult to think about and to talk about. But if it's a reality for you, it's something that you want someone to talk to you about. And I'm by no means a professional in the field or even very well qualified to talk about it. But it is something that I think someone needs to be talking about and trying to address. Because if that's the reality for you, it's not enough to simply say, I'm sorry, but you're going to be part of that initial die-off. You want things that you can do, just like anyone else, to increase your chances, your length of survival. Now, I'm not a doctor. I don't really know a lot of doctors, but I am willing to look at what research can be made into these kinds of things. And if you have thoughts on the subject, I would love to hear from you. This is something that I think a lot about. I have people that I care deeply about who rely on the medical system, who are extremely old or extremely young, or who have infant children. And these are all things that concern me quite a bit, which I spend quite a bit of time thinking about. And so if it's something that you have any insight into, or questions about, or want to talk to me about, even though I probably won't be able to give you actionable advice, I would love to hear from you. And we can start trying to work on some of these solutions. My email is ltaprepping@gmail.com, and I'd love to hear from anybody about any topic. Video suggestions, or the things that we've talked about today, whether that be questions, concerns, or solutions that you have. Anyways, I hope that this was an interesting chat and not too dreary for everybody, but I think it's something that we really need to be talking about. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope that you'll stay tuned with Let's Talk About Prepping for both your stereotypical prepping videos and ones that might be a little bit depressing, but hopefully talk about things that need to be talked about. Thanks for watching, everybody, and stay safe out there.